Okay, today we're going to take a look at factoring simple trinomials. And this is a little bit of a step up from the common factoring. Common factoring, we took a look at our terms and we saw, okay, well, what's common here? What can we take out of all of these terms? Simple trinomials, we can't really do that. And here's an example of a simple trinomial that you're seeing right in front of you, x squared plus 8x plus 7. We call it a trinomial because it has three terms, and we call it simple because there's always a 1 in front of our x, just an imaginary one that we don't really write. So if we have a simple trinomial in our hands, there are other tricks we can use to factor this thing, which is a very important thing because this is eventually going to give us the roots or the x-intercepts of our parabolas. So let's take a look at how we do this. The very first thing we need to do, our whole goal is to figure out what are our two roots, what are our magic numbers here. And let's see how this happens. So we're going to have to try to figure out what are our two numbers, our two magic numbers. And I'm going to show you how that works. So the very first thing we need to do is take a look at our outside numbers. This one's always going to be a 1, so it's nice and easy. And what you would do if you had a number other than a 1, you would multiply our two outside numbers together. So 1 and 7, right? 1 and 7. So we multiplied those. So we're going to need to figure out two numbers that multiply to the product of our two gold numbers that are 1 and 7. Now, since we always have a 1 here, it's really nice and easy for us. We don't have to worry too much. We can just go straight to figuring out which two numbers multiply to this. So we're going to try to figure out two numbers that multiply to our last number. Then, in the middle here, we're going to try to find the same two numbers that have to add up to whatever our middle number is. And here our middle number is 8. This can be a very painful process because you have to try a whole bunch of different combinations in order to finally get one that works. So let's start trying. What two numbers multiply up to 7? It's always easier to start with our multiplication, and then you try to figure out what your addition is. So two numbers that multiply to 7, the only ones I can think of is 1 and 7. So now you try. Okay, 1 times 7 checks out, but if I add those two things, are they going to add up to 8? Well, here, nice, they actually do on our first try. 1 plus 7 does equal 8. So we have our two key numbers. We found them to be 1 and 7. So how do we write them? So once you have your two magic numbers, what you're going to do is you're going to put x and then whatever this number is. This is positive 1. So x plus 1. And then we write our next one. What is this? This is positive 7. So we'll have x plus 7. And that would be it. That would be factored. And just like before, you can always reverse this. You can use FOIL now. We can expand this and we can check to make sure we got this right. So just to show you how that looks, let's run a little check here to make sure that we did get this right. So we're going to use FOIL. We're going to go first. X times x is x squared. We're going to go outside, so x times 7 is plus 7x. Inside, 1 times x is just plus x, and 1 times 7 is just plus 7. So if I clean that up, x squared, 7x plus x is plus 8x plus 7, and that's exactly what we started with, which is perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So we're going to have to run through a bunch of examples of these, and we're going to be actually doing this for 2 days because this is always a very difficult concept for a lot of students. So let's take a look at maybe another one here. And it becomes a little trickier when we have maybe a negative sign involved. So maybe before we do that, let's start with another one. Let's use our x squared plus 11x plus 18. So now we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to try to find two numbers that multiply to our last number. And then we're going to try to find two numbers that add up to our middle number. So can we do this? And take a look. Can you think of two numbers in your head that can make that happen? You might be able to. So what are numbers that multiply to 18? Well, we definitely have 1 and 18. But do those things add up to 11? They certainly do not. They're going to add up to 19. What's our other option? What else multiplies to 18? Well, we have 2 and 9. That works. Does it add up to 11? 2 plus 9, it does add up to 11. So that's great. We found our two numbers again, and now we can just write them exactly like we did last time. We're going to have x, and then here we have positive 2, so x plus 2. And then we have x, and what do we have here? We have positive 9, so x plus 9. Excellent. Now let's look at when you have a negative involved. This is where some students get a little bit tripped up, so make sure you pay attention. So let's say we have the example of x squared plus 2x minus 24. So again, we're going to try to find two numbers that multiply to our last number, which is 24, and two numbers that add up, oh sorry, that's negative 24. See how easy it is to mess up? I was just testing you. To add up to negative 24, and two numbers that add up to 2. As soon as you see a negative sign here, you know you must have one negative number. To get a negative answer here, you have to have one negative number. You can't have two, because if you have two negatives, they multiply together, they're going to make a positive. How do you get a negative? You have to multiply a positive and a negative. So let's take a look. What numbers multiply together to give us 24? Well, we have 1 and 24. But is that going to help us get to 2 if we add up a positive 1 and a negative 24, or a positive 24 and a negative 1? Definitely not. So let's try another one. What about 2 and 12? Well, 2 and 12, there's not really a way that we can make those things add up together to give us 2, so let's try again. 3 and 8. Well, those add up to 20, or those multiply to 24, but can I make that work to get it to 2? Well, what if I made the 3 negative? Well, now the negative 3 times 8 equals negative 24. That's good. Negative 3 plus 8, well, what does that give me? That gives me positive 5, and that's not really what I want. So is there anything else we can work with? Well, what about 4 and 6? Well, 4 times 6 does give me 24, but I need to make it negative. So I have to choose, do I want this number or do I want this number to be negative? And the easiest way to know is just look at this guy here. This number is positive. So since this number is positive, you want to make the bigger number positive. So what's that mean? We'll make the smaller number negative. So now, negative 4 times 6 equals negative 24. Perfect, that checks out. And negative 4 plus 6 is going to equal negative 2, or equal positive 2. So good, we have our two magic numbers. We found them. They are negative 4 and positive 6. So we're going to have x. Our first magic number is minus 4. Our next magic number is positive 6. Excellent. So let's walk through another example of that. Let's do this one. X squared minus x minus 56. So we're going to find two numbers that multiply to 56 and two numbers that add up to whatever number we have here. What number do we actually have here? Well, it's kind of this a little imaginary negative 1 in there, but we don't like to write the ones. So we have negative 1. So what multiplies to 56? Well, 1 and 56 for sure, but there's no way we even bother writing that out. We're trying to get to 1. We have 2 and 28, and we have some other factors, but I think the one that's going to end up working for us is definitely 7 times 8. 7 times 8 does give me positive 56, so we are good. And let's just make sure, 7 plus 8, well, that doesn't give me negative 1, does it? And that's a little bit of a problem here. So to get to negative 1, I have to decide which of these numbers do I, oh, and sorry, this needs to be negative 56 again. Which of these numbers do I need to make negative? Remember, what do you need to inspect? This number is negative, which means you need to make your bigger number negative. Okay, so let's put a negative in front of our negative 8. So 7 times negative 8 does give me negative 56. That's awesome. 7 plus negative 8 does give me negative 1. And let's say you mess that up. Let's say you put the negative in front of the 7. Just double check. And if it doesn't work out, switch your negative sign to the other number and try again. It's trial and error. It's going to take you some time. Okay? So what are our two magic numbers? We have x plus 7 and we have x minus 8. So those are the two numbers we came up with. Okay, let's try another one. X squared minus 13x plus 40. Oh boy, okay. So two numbers that are going to multiply to give us 40 and two numbers that are going to add together to give us negative 13. So what two numbers are going to multiply to give us 40? Well, we have 1 and 40. That's not really going to get to 13 at all. What about 2 and 20? And that's not going to get us to 13, but we're getting a little closer. What about 4 and 10? 4 times 10 gets us to 40, but is that going to get us to 13? No, that's going to get us to 14, so not so good. What about 8 and 5? Ooh, 8 and 5 works. That gets us to positive 40. 8 times 5 gives us positive 40, and let's just double check. 8 plus 5 gets us to 13, which is great, except this is negative 13. So what do you need to do? Well, how can we get 8 and 5 to get us to negative 13? Well, what you need to do is you need to say, okay, what if I made it negative 8 plus negative 5? Well, negative 8 plus negative 5 is going to get us to 13, and negative 8 times negative 5, two negatives make a positive, that also gets us to the 40. So that one's a little tricky, and you're going to have to work with that in order to get to that kind of example there. So negative 8 times negative 5 gives us 40. Negative 8 plus negative 5 gives us 13. We have our two numbers, x minus 8 and x minus 5. So let's do one more, and then we'll call it. Okay, last one, we'll use x squared minus 5x plus 6. So we have which two numbers will multiply together to give us 6? Which two numbers are going to add together to give us negative 5? Okay, let's take a look at that. So which two numbers add together to give us 6? Well, 1 and 6, that looks like it works, which is good. 1 times 6, perfect. And look at this. 1 and 6 are going to give us negative 5. But we need to figure out it's negative 5. 1 plus 6 gives us 7. So what if I made my 6 negative? Now, 1 plus negative 6 gives me negative 5. That's perfect. But we have a problem. When I put that negative sign up here, I get 1 times negative 6. That's going to give me negative 6, and that does not work. So these two numbers are not my key. Is there anything else we can try? Well, there is one more set of numbers that multiply to give us 6. That set is 2 times 3. 2 times 3 gives us 6. Perfect. And 2 plus 3 gives us positive 5. We need this to be negative 5. So what do? Well, if it equals positive 5 right now, we need it to be negative 5. If we put a negative sign in front, negative 2 plus negative 3 is going to give us negative 5. That checks out. And negative 2 times negative 3 is going to give us positive 6. Two negatives multiplied together are going to give us positive. So that gives us positive 6. So now we have x minus 2 and x minus 3. And that is where we will end off for today. We are going to be spending 2 days on this, so you're not going to be really touching anything else in terms of new lessons until we've spent like 2 lessons kind of covering this. So today, make sure you look at some of the introductory stuff for this, and then tomorrow there's going to be some additional practice for you to help you build these skills.